I know things have been grim lately, but here's the thing. The Fantastic Four First Steps has finally arrived after actual years of waiting, and I am so happy to say that this is easily the best Fantastic Four film, which admittedly is a very low bar, but I'd go as far as to say this is one of my favorite comic book movies of all time. I don't apologize for the obscene amount of puns I'm going to make, but I'm going to do my best to avoid describing literally everything as fantastic for the rest of however long this video ends up being. As a lifelong Fantastic Four fan, I absolutely loved this movie. It's so rewarding to finally see my favorite superhero team of all time done justice after 3 previous very messy live-action adaptations. I guess the 4th time's the charm, which is incredibly on brand for them. I have genuinely waited my entire life for a movie like this, and I am so happy to say that it did not disappoint. Fantastic Four First Steps is a breathtaking sci-fi spectacle grounded by the perfect family dynamic that embraces the comics in ways I've always dreamed of seeing in live action. Filled with incredible performances, a gorgeous aesthetic, and so much passion, I left with the biggest smile on my face after I picked my jaw up off the floor. The family relationship is at the heart of the film and really helps you fall in love with these characters. It's so great to see the Fantastic Four finally treated as celebrities and cosmic explorers who genuinely care for each other. They have such an authentic relationship with each other and feel like an actual family. With Reed and Sue as the parents, Ben and Johnny as the fun uncles, and Franklin as the kid they're all coming together to take care of. There's never a moment where they just feel like work colleagues or a bunch of friends, as they actually feel like a family who loves and cares for each other and spends every waking moment together. It's their defining character trait in the comics and the most important thing to get right in a Fantastic Four adaptation, so I'm very glad that this movie made it a priority to treat them as an actual family and let us see that bond grow and deepen throughout the course of the movie, as they're faced with these hard-hitting challenges that put their family in harm's way, and it's only through embracing each other and being able to support one another that they're actually able to solve all the challenges that are thrown their way. The Fantastic Four are a very unique superhero team, and this movie understands that. They're not like the Avengers, who basically act as the world's global firefighting force, or the X-Men, a team that fits this civil rights allegory and doubles as a paramilitary school for kids. The Fantastic Four should always be positioned as the premier superhero team in the universe, as they are enamored by the world's global population, as they challenge the unknown and make the impossible possible. And this movie goes out of its way to actually show us that, as we get to see the team as explorers and scientists first and foremost, which is so long overdue. In a time where pretty much everything has been done in a superhero movie, it's so refreshing to see a team that is so focused on creative puzzle solving, and it makes them feel unique in this sea of superhero adaptations. And a large reason for that is how well this movie is cast. They have such an authentic sense of chemistry together, as all their interactions feel so real. I don't think it would be a stretch to say that they are the best adapted characters in the entire MCU. Every single aspect of their characterization is picture perfect. From the way they act together, to how they operate to protect the world, to the way they casually use their powers all the time. It feels like the Fantastic Four were ripped straight from the comics. Vanessa Kirby is easily the heart of the Fantastic Four and steals the entire movie for me. She is an absolute powerhouse on screen and embodies everything you'd want to see in a Sue Storm adaptation. She's the glue that keeps the team together, a comforting mother, and such a badass in the movie. Oh my god, she has probably the coolest moment in the entire film. Every single time she used her powers, I sat up in my seat just eager to see what she did with them. And on the topic of her powers, they look so good. For someone who has total control over light, I love that it actually looks like she's bending light to her whim to create these force fields. Using a chromatic aberration to show that also looks so pretty. It's such a great evolution of her abilities to take them and then reinvent them in this way that creates the most dazzling visuals possible. I think this is such an inspired improvement that makes it look like she's actually doing something around her and just shows how incredibly powerful she is. But despite how good of a job this movie does portraying just how much of a powerhouse Sue Storm is, I love the fact that her greatest strength comes from who she is as a person and that maternal instinct she has. She has such an infectious love for her family and her child, but what Fantastic Four does so well is not define her by those traits, and she gets to be a completely three-dimensional character with wants and needs outside of just being a mother. That just acts as another layer, making her one of the most most interesting characters in the entire MCU, and Vanessa Kirby does a really spectacular job bringing all of that to life and making Sue feel so fleshed out, covering everything from her more mischievous side as we see her scaring Ben and Johnny with her invisibility, to the fierce protection she has for the people she cares for. She's given so much depth and emotion and vulnerability as a character that you just can't help but feel for her as she is thrust into the most stressful situation imaginable, and then seeing all those complex emotions that Vanessa portrays incredibly well bubble up over the surface until they culminate in this big climactic moment where we see a mother's rage on full display. It is an incredible payoff, and I really appreciate that we get to see a fully developed version of Sue Storm finally on the big screen, taking center stage and showing people just how cool she really can be when you have someone who cares about the character writing her. I am truly obsessed with her, and she deserves to be one of the faces of the MCU going forward. This is Marvel's first lady we're talking about here, alright? She is so long overdue for this treatment, and it has me beaming with excitement for her future. And the same thing could be said for Pedro Pascal's Mr. Fantastic, because I truly don't think anyone could play Reed better than Pedro. I know I'm biased because Pedro is my favorite actor, so I had a feeling that he would kill it, but he exceeded even the highest expectations and gave me the Reed Richards I've always wanted to see. He's able to balance Reed's guilt complex and anxiety with his love as a dorky father incredibly well, walking a very fine line between stress and compassion like only he could. And what I really like on Pedro's take on Reed is that it challenges him as an actor to do something that goes against the grain for him, as he has a very reserved performance playing the smartest man in the world who can't solve social interaction. He does such a great job effortlessly showcasing Reed's brilliance, but it's in his facial expressions where he really shines, and you can see him calculating everything in real time, or the confusion in his eyes when he can't read the room. And I think that this is probably as close as you're ever going to get without outright confirming it that Reed Richards is an autistic character, which I think is how he should always be characterized. Someone who is so hyper-fixated on his love of science, but struggles in interpersonal connection, and that is exactly who Reed Richards is. And I think that Pedro does an outstanding job of showing the little nuances of that, whether it be in the way he speaks or his physical movements. He brings such a thought-out take on Reed Richards to life. I think more than anyone else in the movie, Pedro's Reed feels like a complete and total encapsulation of Reed Richards from the comics. Specifically the way Ryan North writes Reed Richards, I feel like Pedro completely embodies that version of the character, which makes me very happy. This is my ideal take on Reed Richards, and I'm so glad to see a version that prioritizes his care for his family just as much as his guilt and anxiety, along with his hyperfixations and difficulty processing emotions, and someone who gets so caught up in his science and will go blabbering on about something that the entire room has lost track of 3 sentences ago. We are so lucky to have him in the MCU at all, but especially playing someone as important as Reed Richards. There's nobody on the planet who can bring all the complexities out of Reed like Pedro can, and I am over the moon with how much he shines in this film. Just like Eben Moss-Bachrach, who I am convinced was born to play the Thing. He's warm, friendly, and so lovable, but you can tell there's this sense of longing under that rocky exterior. I really love how much of a different take on the Thing this movie is, as they focus much more on his humanity. I do wish we could have gotten a little bit more of Ben in this movie, but I'll talk more about that in the spoiler section of the video. What makes the Thing such an interesting character is the fact that despite his intimidating appearance, he's just a big ol' softy, and this movie understands that more than any other Fantastic Four adaptation we've seen, as we get to see him live more of a normal life. He walks around wearing a collared shirt and a tie, and there are little kids all around that look up to him, and you can see that he takes this seriously and wants to be a good role model, but despite all of the praise and acceptance he's received, he still very clearly isn't at peace with himself, as you see little moments where he's still trying to deal with what he's become over the last 4 years, and has a hard time coming to terms with being a public figure like this. I know a lot of people don't love how normal his voice sounds, as they wanted him to have a more deeper voice that resembles that of a monster, but I think that letting Eben use his natural voice is a really smart idea, because it continues to lean into the idea that the only thing different about Ben is his appearance. He's still the same guy who grew up on Yancey Street all those years ago, it's just that now he's made of rocks, and I think that it goes a long way to connect him to his humanity. And also, the CGI on him is flawless. He looked incredible the entire movie. I don't think there was a single shot where I didn't believe that the Thing was real. It honestly feels like the Thing just existed in the real world. There's so much detail between every every rock, nook, and cranny on that model, and it really shows on screen, especially with those bright blue eyes peeking through. Using a CGI model is able to give him a much more expressive appearance that you could never get with a practical suit, and his movements flow so much better that way. I think it was a very smart decision, and it really pays off in the film as someone who has always adored this character. They do such a good job nailing Ben's characterization and giving us a new side of him that we haven't seen before, all while faithfully adapting him and showcasing some of his history on Yancey Street and the fact that he is very prominently Jewish in this movie. I need him to have a bigger role the next time we see him because Ebon Moss-Bachrach has the potential to become the best comic book movie casting of all time. And all of you who ever doubted Joseph Quinn owe him a huge apology. He has become the definitive take on the Human Torch for me. So many people wrote off his casting immediately, and while he was far from my own first pick, I wanted to keep an open mind because there was clearly a reason they did this, and the more we've seen from him, the more I've seen the vision. But now getting to see his take on Johnny Storm in its entirety, I am so amazed and happy to see Johnny done correctly for once. It is so nice to finally see a version of Johnny who is as smart as they are annoying. He might be a master rage baiter, constantly teasing Ben and trying to get under his very thick skin, but he's also so genuine and compassionate, and feels like a real loving brother and uncle. He is someone you would actually want to be around, as he's fueled by his innate sense of curiosity and earns his place on the team. More often than not in Fantastic Four adaptations, Johnny's characterization succumbs to the fatal flaw of dumbing him down to just be the hot-headed womanizer, when he is so much more than that in the comics, and this movie makes sure to show you that Johnny is more than just another himbo. He's one of the best parts of the entire movie and has a really fun and exciting subplot with the Silver Surfer that I think is handled very well. It's a great way to showcase every facet of his personality. Of course, his love of women is there, and you get to see him be enamored with the celebrity status the Fantastic Four has garnered for themselves. But even more with that, he has such an obsession with space as a whole, and I think that getting to see his character through that lens adds whole new layers of depth and dimension, and the movie makes sure we understand why he's on this team in the first place, as he is a genuinely smart character who is solving problems and has a unique perspective that helps the team in a lot of really interesting ways. His Human Torch design also looks so good. I love the way he's able to light up certain parts of his body, like when he will save a kid and make sure to only have his back lit so that he can properly comfort the kid and make sure they don't feel scared. It's a great attention to detail, and I think goes a long way in showing just how brave and compassionate Johnny can be, because he charges headfirst into danger in this movie and feels like the most definitive take on Johnny Storm we will ever see in live action. I adore him so much, and I cannot wait to see his future in the MCU. I don't care what we have to do to get this, but I need to see him be best friends with Peter Parker in the MCU. Okay, their dynamic would be electric together. I think for a lot of people though, the standout in this movie is going to be Galactus and the Silver Surfer, because they are everything you could ever want and more. It is so surreal to finally see an accurate take on Galactus in live action after years of suffering through fart clouds, but that adaptation can finally rest in piss, as we finally have a version of Galactus who's just this big cosmic force of nature in a suit of armor terrorizing the Fantastic Four on Earth. He is such a great adaptation of the character, and every time he was on screen, my jaw would drop. I cannot believe how well they handled him, from the visuals to the characterization, or the way that the IMAX ratio shifts when Galactus enters the frame to really show his scale. It is so impressive as they use the visual medium to its full extent. So the way he speaks with this deep, commanding voice from Ralph Ineson, it is incredible. The first time you hear him speak in the theater, it is a religious experience. I wish I could listen to that on loop forever. It is so intimidating and perfect. He truly feels and acts like this ancient force of nature, and someone who has so little care for what's happening beneath him, as he's entirely focused on completing his goal and feeding on the universe because that's his only purpose. He's impossible to prepare for in the most exciting ways, and creates such an interesting challenge for the Fantastic Four on not just a physical level, but especially on an emotional one. And I really appreciate what they do to make Shala Ball stand out as the Silver Surfer. She's handled really well in this movie and is so impossibly cool every single time you see her. They make such great use of her powers and abilities, as every single time she's on screen, she's doing the most dazzling thing possible. So terrifying in her own right as this herald who won't quit until she gets what she needs. Haunted by her past and determined to make the most of this sacrifice she's made. I really like how they handle her dynamic with Galactus and that push and pull she feels between him and the Fantastic Four. They do such a great job differentiating her as a character, and has without a doubt the best chase scene in the entire MCU. Also, special shout out to Mole Man because I couldn't find a way to naturally fit him into the video. It's so crazy to me to think that there's a multi-million-dollar blockbuster that Mole Man, of all characters, plays a surprisingly substantial part in. I used to pray for times like this. I was campaigning for Mole Man to be the villain of this movie, so to see him appear at all in the film is amazing to me, but especially with how he plays around in this universe and the way they twist the character to do something completely new with him that also feels entirely in line with his character. He's especially someone I need to see more of going into the future because I feel like we're just scratching the surface with him, and he could offer so many interesting conflicts for the Fantastic Four. Also, not to keep getting sidetracked, because I could probably make another hour-long video just gushing over him, but I loved Herbie with my whole heart in this movie. I was so excited when he was announced to be part of the film because I think he's such a cute addition to the Fantastic Four, and a great way to show just how smart Reed is that he was able to create artificial intelligence in the 60s, and Herbie's design shows that really well with the fact that his face is made up of a repurposed tape recorder. He looks so perfect and is so cute. I loved him so much that I was willing to spend $75 on this Herbie concession container from AMC, and I regret absolutely nothing. Just look at him. He's literally a projector and plays the theme. This is the best thing I own. But I'm so glad that he is much more than just another merchandising opportunity for this movie, as he feels like another member of the family. He's constantly helping all of them out, whether it be preparing dinner in the kitchen with Ben, or building the crib for Reed. He's more than just a robot assistant and someone they genuinely care for. I love that he gets to go on all of their trips with them. It's so funny seeing him in space and the influential role he has in keeping the spaceship stabilized. As a massive Herbie enthusiast, I'm so glad that he's in this movie and has so much screen time in the film. It's a great way for the movie to embrace the nature of the Fantastic Four comics to give us someone like Herbie, and the fact that they went out of their way to build a practical robot is insane. It just goes to show the dedication to practicality this film had, that they had several people puppeting him around on set so the actors had someone to talk to and reference. Rest assured, Marvel, I will be doing whatever it takes to steal him, and you can't stop me. When that robot goes missing in the middle of the night, I want you to know it was me who took him. One of the best things about this movie, though, is the fact that it takes place in a universe of its own. You couldn't tell this story in the main MCU timeline, and it takes full advantage of that, raising the stakes while also making you care about this utopia and everyone in it. They're not tied down to the established continuity of the MCU, and it really benefits from that idea, as they're able to do so many new and fresh things and take risks to give the film a unique style and a personality of its own. It is a fully fantastical, retro-futuristic universe where pretty much everything can happen in this heightened reality, all the way from flying cars to fighting super apes, and none of it feels out of place. It honestly feels so little like a superhero movie, but I mean that in the most complimentary way because the Fantastic Four aren't traditional superheroes like I said earlier. This is a family movie more than anything else, as the focus is entirely on these relatable characters. But besides that, the movie has more in common with something like Interstellar than any other superhero film out there. This is very much so in the genre of sci-fi, as we're dealing with space exploration here, and I think that is exactly the kind of tone you want when you're dealing with the Fantastic Four, just with the necessary elements of superhero storytelling sprinkled in there to give it the charm you need to truly make it a good Fantastic Four adaptation, and it uses the blank canvas of a new universe to tell that story. With the Fantastic Four being the only superheroes on this earth, it gives them that celebrity status, but it also means that the burden to stop Galactus comes down entirely on them. It adds a whole lot of stakes to this movie as their reputations are on the line. You truly do feel like their Earth could be destroyed at any moment. Whoever it was that came up with the idea to place them in a separate universe so that the storytelling could be utilized to its full potential deserves the biggest raise possible. This movie fundamentally could not work in any cinematic universe, and that is one of its biggest strengths, especially considering the fact that it means they can create this beautifully bright retro-futuristic aesthetic that complements the team so well. What made the Fantastic Four so popular when they first debuted was the fact that we were knee-deep in the middle of the space race, and these characters were shaped by that time period. Their origin is literally tied to that concept as they get shot by cosmic rays trying to be the first people to break into orbit like that. So I think it is such an inspired and great idea to to bring the Fantastic Four back to that era in their own universe, as we get to see them inhabit a world completely of their own, one where Reed Richards actually existed in the 60s and was able to transform things into the retro-futuristic utopia of their dreams. They take full advantage of that aesthetic, and I think it goes a long way in making the Fantastic Four stand out in not just other titles in the MCU, but other superhero movies as a whole. Director Matt Shakman fully embraces the larger-than-life nature of the Fantastic Four by placing them into this setting, and it allows for some really unique and exciting filmmaking. Literally every single frame of this film feels ripped straight out of the comics, especially with a character like Galactus. Every single shot of him is this gorgeous splash page brought to life. As this movie has some of the best visuals in the entire MCU, there's so much thought and care put into every shot of the film, as the visuals are so incredibly inspired and intentional with these bright colors popping on screen. I'm going to be thinking about that aforementioned space sequence for a while, because it is probably the best looking action set piece in the entire MCU. It's more interstellar than anything else, as you get to see the wonder and marvel of space on full display. The production design and attention to detail in the movie is so good as well. You can tell they built practical sets for the actors to work in, whether it be the huge expansive Times Square backlot or Reed's laboratory. But it's the little details that encompass those sets that really sell this 60s aesthetic. Oh, and how can I forget to mention the fact that they just made Subterranea real? I'm not even exaggerating when I say this. We wouldn't even know this set existed had it not been for urban miners who just happened to stumble across it after the movie finished shooting. And there's a conversation to be had about them just abandoning this underground, but I think it's so cool that they actually put in the effort to bring buses down there and make an actual Subterranea environment for the cast to stand in. It's no wonder that it looks so good in the movie, because it's just actually real, and it's there, and you can visit it, and you know what? If we get 5,000 likes on this video, I'll go visit Subterranea. I'm gonna become the new mole man. But this kind of commitment to practical filmmaking results in a movie that has such a unique sense of style, especially in those gorgeous bright blue costumes that I am begging Marvel to never change. I absolutely adore how they look and how realistic they are. It's the closest we're ever going to get to seeing spandex in live action, as they're basically wearing these practical sweaters with the Fantastic Four designs on them, and I think it works so well to fit in with that 60s vibe they got going on, while also popping on screen. Those costumes instantly became some of my favorite in the entire genre. Director Matt Shakman has talked a lot about how he tried to do things as authentically practical as he could to the 60s, even using some of those filmmaking techniques to pull everything off, going as far as to use optical illusions to make Sue's light powers practically.
Sue Storm powers is an optical effect that you could have done in the 60s, and that we use video projectors and things like that to create.
Which is just such an insane dedication to the craft, and it all shows on screen. There's a real sense of tangibility and practicality throughout the entire movie, even down to Galactus himself, as they had Ralph Ineson in a practical costume walking around on miniatures. I really appreciate them going the extra mile to capture that era of 60s filmmaking in a bottle and use that to make this movie look as good as they can. Especially when it comes to miniatures, if I could just nerd out for a second, because I feel like there's such a lost art nowadays. You rarely ever see a movie make use of them when I think it is the coolest filmmaking technique possible. Building something impossibly big down to scale, and then using that to shoot makes it feel so much more real. And I'm so grateful that Shakman used that for Galactus and also the space sequences with the Excelsior, and I think it really pays off and makes that sequence as exciting as it is. Oh my god, I can't believe I've gone this long without mentioning it, but Michael Giacchino belongs in the GOAT composer conversation already. His score in this movie is next level. I felt like I was gonna levitate in the theater every time that Fantastic Four theme kicked in. It enhances literally everything happening in this movie with a sense of awe and wonder. The way it builds from this peaceful lullaby to this swinging 60s anthem is so satisfying. It honestly already was before the movie, but now after seeing it, I can confidently say that it is my favorite superhero movie theme of all time. No song has ever captured the essence of a character quite like this one has here. But then on the other side of things, Giacchino is just flexing his talents as he's able to perfectly highlight the cosmic dread of Galactus. The choir that kicks in when he's on screen really goes a long way to make him feel like this god and titan just towering above them, holier than they are, on a different plane of existence. It adds to his otherworldly aura and makes the scenes feel so tense, all while still sounding so futuristic and space age. I don't understand how he does it. There is no composer who has mastered the art of transforming a movie with their score quite like Giacchino. And for as much as I absolutely love this movie, it is not perfect. The pacing is definitely too fast, and I think the movie could have benefited from more time to sit in the existential dread and process things. I wouldn't say that the third act is rushed, because I think it still comes to a very satisfying conclusion conclusion, but it really could have used like 5 to 10 more minutes to flesh out the world. And I totally get why the movie moves at a breakneck speed as they want to sell the urgency of the situation in this race against time against Galactus. You can't exactly take a break when he's gonna eat the Earth, as the movie just goes from scene to scene to scene without taking a beat to pause. There are some noticeably missing scenes from the trailers, especially with Ben, that didn't make it into the final cut, and I really would have appreciated seeing them. In comparison to the rest of the team, Ben definitely has the least amount to do, and you can clearly tell that they cut out a few scenes when handling his arc in the movie, to the point where it kind of just gets lost going to the third act, and I think that had they not been cut out of the movie, it would have really enhanced the film and made it feel complete. It's not like the cut scenes are detracting from my enjoyment, and the movie still flows very naturally, but I left wanting more, knowing that had they included the extra material, I truly think we would have had a generational film on our hands. You can definitely tell that this movie was edited down to be 1 hour and 55 minutes, and I think that there's a 2 hour 15-minute cut of this movie somewhere out there in the world that I just know would be my favorite film of all time. The only thing holding this movie back from being a genuine all-timer is the fact that it feels like we're missing part of it. And also the CGI baby. Okay, just please stop CGIing babies, guys. We're never gonna nail the technology. It always looks so uncanny. Surely it can't be that hard to just hand someone a doll and pretend it's a baby. Alright, they're actors, they can make it work. So besides the CGI baby, just a few more minutes would perfect this movie, and I am really hopeful that one day we do get to see that extended cut. God dang it! I'll do the VFX work for free if that's what they're worried about. All of that being said, this movie managed to live up to my expectations and deliver on the Fantastic Four film I have always dreamed of seeing. There is so much care put into every second of this movie, as it truly feels like a love letter to Marvel's first family, and especially Jack Kirby, which I really appreciated. There has never been a comic book movie that has openly embraced the mythos of the character quite like this one has. Changes have been made to update them for the modern day, but Matt Shakman has such a deep respect and understanding of who the Fantastic Four are at their core, and has made it his priority to do the most accurate possible take he can on them. They all serve such an important role on the team and feel like a real, authentic family. I've probably overused this phrase throughout the video, but I can't think of a better way to say it than that it's like they were ripped straight out of the comics. I could not have asked for a better Fantastic Four adaptation than this. Putting a well-deserved spotlight on Kirby, that goes to show just how much the creatives involved respected the source material and wanted to do it justice. You can just tell that the film was made by Fantastic Four fans, and that goes a long way in connecting with me. Longtime fans are going to absolutely adore this movie, but it'll make even the most uninformed, instant fans of the Fantastic Four, and that's so beautiful to me. I cannot wait to see the reaction this movie gets from everybody. The Fantastic Four are finally being positioned as the important characters they are again, and I love that. I have waited so long for a day like today, where the Fantastic Four's best years are ahead of them. I can't wait to rewatch this movie as soon as possible, especially considering the fact that there aren't any MCU movies for over a year, and that's probably gonna drive me insane, so I'm just gonna fill that void with endless rewatches of this movie that finally does my favorite family right. Okay, that's my non-spoiler review, but I can't wait any longer, so I'm just going to talk about all these characters and the overall plot of the movie in depth now. Consider this your final warning, but just go watch the movie if you haven't yet. Not only are you gonna love it, but I need it to be successful to guarantee a sequel as soon as humanly possible. Alright, I need Fantastic Four world domination from here on out. Just make it the Fantastic Four cinematic universe and I will be happy. And then come back to watch the rest of the review when you're done to hear my rating at the end. Alright, now that everyone else has left, we can talk about that full frontal Galactus scene. What the hell was that all about? Alright, I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but that doesn't actually happen in the movie. Now that I've actually scared away everyone who hasn't clicked off yet, let's talk about this film in full detail because I have so much to say. I'm afraid this might be my longest yap session yet, but honestly, I'm happy to. I think it's only fitting to start off by talking about that incredible montage at the start of the film because it warmed my Fantastic Four loving heart so much. Not only a really smart way to catch us up with the Fantastic Four and skip over their origin while still showing us how they've come to be, but the moment that theme kicked in and you see Ben burst out of the ship, I knew that this movie was in safe hands and we would be in for a treat. Besides being able to point at the screen like a madman, seeing all these different references like the Giganto fight paying homage to Fantastic Four #1, or those gorgeous costumes we see them in, which is probably the most comic accurate suits we will ever see in live action. It's a really fun and exciting way to show us this exposition and give us a taste for what we can expect in the film, setting the tone and letting us see the Fantastic Four in action and all of their powers on a dazzling display. From Reed using his body like a slingshot to defeat a super ape, to Mole Man getting arrested wearing that iconic green cloak and his goofy little glasses that I love so much, to a really touching cameo from the original 1994 unreleased Fantastic Four movie cast, finally giving them a moment on the big screen after all these years. It's so sweet to see their entire history honored like this. Outside of all the faithful characterization in the film, it's probably the biggest indication of how much care and passion went into making this movie and wanting to do the Fantastic Four right. I wish I could just bottle up the way those first 10 minutes made me feel and live off that high forever. It is every Fantastic Four fan's dream come true. But this movie is so much more than just fan service, as I really love the hard-hitting questions they ask and the themes they tackle in the film. Despite how little I've talked about him thus far, Franklin plays the biggest role in the movie, which is very funny to think about considering they tried to hide him in the first trailers. But the way he's used in the film to ground this unfathomable cosmic chaos in real human problems goes a long way in making this story land for me. It makes the Fantastic Four feel so relatable when you see them struggle with these problems and tackle the biggest unsolved mystery in life, that being how to properly raise a child and how scary that is. I'm not going to pretend like I exactly have experience with that, but they do such a great job showing you the trials and tribulations that Reed and Sue go through, and I think that it really comes through on screen to create an incredibly emotional arc for the family. For a team that pretty much has all they could have ever wanted in life, adding in this unknown element really spices things up and puts them out of their depth in a way that I don't think they ever could have prepared for. These are people who have reached the edges of the cosmos and done things human beings could only ever dream of achieving in their lives, just on a regular Thursday afternoon, but don't know the first thing about how to properly raise a kid. And I think that is so endearing to see, because you can tell that they're all clearly trying their best and just doing everything they can to make sure that this kid will have the most perfect life possible. And I love that we get to see them all pitching in, whether it be Reed and Herbie baby-proofing the house, or Ben reading books to try and make sure he can be the best uncle possible. It takes things up a notch and makes the family dynamic click more than ever before. And over the course of the movie, we get to see them struggle with these problems thrown their way and how they have to adapt and grow to actually become a proper family. It's such a smart idea to use Franklin as the inciting incident for the film and what drives them forward for the rest of the movie, trying to do the best they can in spite of the unknown, and embracing that by the end of the film. But I think that it especially becomes really interesting when you bring in the moral ethics of Galactus giving them the ultimatum of either letting him devour the entire Earth or giving up Franklin. That hard-hitting question is the big emotional dilemma of the entire movie, and I think they do a really good job exploring that and seeing the repercussions of both options. Especially with the Fantastic Four being celebrities in this universe, we get to see what happens when the public turn against them and how they deal with that. They go from being celebrated at the start of the film just for existing, to having an angry mob of protesters outside their window because they aren't willing to give up their firstborn, which is a crazy dark turn that the movie takes, but I think that it works really well to add to the stakes of the situation and make you feel emotionally invested in these characters. Particularly when it comes to the debates they have amongst themselves and seeing them try and solve this puzzle. I touched on it a bit already, but the Fantastic Four are at their absolute best when they are trying to solve problems. Putting them in a situation where things feel hopeless and as if they have no other choice, and then watching them fight their way out of it in a very creative way is exactly the kind of thing that has always drawn me to Fantastic Four stories. And Galactus is the biggest and best example of that. So having him deliver on this ultimatum and then watching it absolutely crush them at every single turn as they try and fight their way out of it only to fail over and over and over again, and watching the Fantastic Four try and come up with new and creative ways where they don't have to sacrifice Franklin to save the world, but they also don't have to sacrifice the world to save Franklin. I think that there's such interesting questions to ask, and this movie makes the most of them. You can't help but feel for every single member of the team as they're put in the worst possible situation with the actual weight of the world on their shoulders. And I think that moral dilemma is best exemplified through Sue Storm's character arc, because she is far and away the lead character of this movie, and it is so much better off for it. After 3 different Fantastic Four movies where she is completely sidelined and abandoned as a character, just there to be nothing more than Reed's wife, it is so vindicating to finally get a movie that explores what an absolute badass she is. She has so many standout scenes in the film and is easily one of the strongest characters in the MCU, not just physically, but also mentally. She is a fully realized and complex character, just doing her best with the cards she was dealt, and you really get to see just how stressful of an experience being a mother is, especially when it comes to childbirth. The entire space sequence when she's in labor is not only one of the most beautiful scenes in the entire MCU with those dazzling visuals on screen, but also it is so tense in this race against time as the Silver Surfer is literally catching up to them like like this horror movie villain, doing whatever it takes to get Franklin while Sue is just trying her best to push him out. And what really caught me off guard was Sue telling Johnny to straight up kill the surfer, but I love how she's willing to stand on business and do whatever it takes to protect her family. As we see all of Sue's emotions start to bubble over the surface when her fear finally starts to take over. Despite everything they did to prepare for this day, it comes at the worst possible time when they just became enemies with the most powerful being in the universe. And I really love the way this scene echoes Sue and Reed's initial conversation at the start of the film, as now it's up to Reed to reassure Sue that nothing's going to change. It's not only a really cute moment that Pedro and Vanessa sell incredibly well, but it's so nice to see the movie portray such a raw and beautiful moment like the miracle of life like that, and how even the strongest people on this earth are completely taken aback by it, and in over their head for the first time ever. But when things take a turn with Sue, as Galactus gives them the ultimatum, that is when we really get to see Vanessa Kirby do some of the best work of her entire career, being asked to give up her only child like that, especially when you take into account the fact that her and Reed had been trying for years and they didn't think it was even possible. And now all these years later, they finally get lucky and are given this thing they've always wanted in life. And it's now being used as a bargaining chip by Galactus as he threatens to eat the baby, which sounds horrifying, but is some really interesting character motivation. And we get to fully explore the mental toll that has on Sue. Franklin is this blessing to her after years of not being able to conceive, and I can't even begin to imagine the mental torture it must be for Galactus to toy with her like that, trying to make her give him up like he's nothing. Meanwhile, Franklin is Sue's entire world. And that alone is such a dark situation to put her in, but even more so when the world turn against her for it, being called selfish by them because she's not going to make the ultimate sacrifice. It is such a crushing storyline, but Sue is able to take this dire situation and turn it on its head into something so inspiring as she has the strength to stand up for herself. She gets this really beautiful monologue at the beginning of the third act as she makes a plea for humanity to see the peril of this situation and comforting them and letting them know that while she's not willing to sacrifice Franklin, she's also not just going to let the world die. I think it is expertly delivered by Vanessa Kirby and the epitome of what the Fantastic Four stand for, as she gives such a vulnerable performance as the emotional crux of this film. Honestly, making Sue the lead of the movie was the best decision they ever could have made. The other three members of the team are very outwardly flashy and have a much more defined character traits in the mainstream, so by making Sue the lead, it basically forces the audience to care about her and pay attention to what she's doing when we see things through her perspective. It's such a smart way to make Sue feel much more important as the glue that holds this team together and a character that is so incredibly important to the Fantastic Four, especially when she's out there mothering on levels that nobody has ever mothered on before. I especially love that she's the leader of the Future Foundation in this movie. It's much different from what the Future Foundation traditionally is in the comics, but I think it's such a smart change that I would honestly love to see the comics adapt. I know synergy is a very scary word when it comes to comics, but I honestly think this addition to Sue's character is a great way to flesh her out and give her a more prominent role in the universe. Just keep the whole scientists of the future aspect of it while making Sue the political face of the organization. Having Sue create the Future Foundation and making her the political face of the Fantastic Four is a really great way to differentiate her from the other four, where Reed is the scientist of the group, Johnny is the celebrity, Ben is the everyman on the ground level. You now have Sue taking over in the political space and showing just how the Fantastic Four can make real everlasting change, literally convincing the world to disarm and creating this new status quo of global peace. She is so effective in this role, and I think it is a great position for her to take as the responsible adult in the room and someone who is able to solve things through empathy, as the moral compass of the Fantastic Four, guiding everyone to a better tomorrow, and then using the Future Foundation to secure a brighter future for Marvel's first family. I think a really great way this movie shows that is how they handle the character of Mole Man, my beloved silly little freak of a man, who plays a surprisingly big role in this film, as Sue has actually broached a treaty between the surface world and Subterranea. Not only just a great way to evolve the Mole Man character and give him a really unique relationship with the Fantastic Four, but also it just goes to show how capable Sue is, as she is the only person he can trust. Even so far as having that rivalry with Reed on the side, where he wants Reed to be the one to ask for help, just so he can gloat it in his face. I do love that they still have an established rivalry, but it's so nice to see this new status quo for the Fantastic Four, as the people of New York City get to hide out in Subterranea when Galactus arrives. We're able to see just how capable Sue is on her own, and I really appreciate that. It is by far my favorite thing about her in this adaptation, and Vanessa brings it to life in such an exciting way, which is ironic because somehow she dies in this movie? I mean, she gets revived by Franklin, but like, I genuinely did not expect them to do a fake out death with Sue Storm in the slightest. She does one of the coolest things I've ever seen in a superhero movie and locks in to brute force push Galactus into the teleporter. It is such an insane scene that will always stick with me. The visceral reaction she has seeing Franklin in danger as she's able to tap into her powers in a way that we've never seen before, showcasing just how overpowered she really is, and forcing him across the city right where they need him to be just so they can finally defeat him. It is such a rewarding moment and a great showcase of how capable she is as a character, but it still caught me completely by surprise and honestly made me tear up a bit, which just goes to show how much I cared about these characters that over the course of not even 2 hours, they have me falling in love with Sue Storm's characterization to the point where I'm overwhelmed with emotion. Seeing Reed, this man of science, find this problem he can't solve as his wife is just laying there and he's begging for her to stay with him, finally letting out his emotions after being so reserved for the entire film, as the scene sits in this cruel and quiet sadness, is something I'm never gonna forget. And for as shocking of a moment it is, I think it's a really important one to show just how caring of a character Sue is, that she's willing to give her own life just to protect those around her. She does not play when it comes to Franklin, and she is willing to do whatever it takes to make sure that he is safe and happy. And then when Franklin finally starts to manifest his powers and is able to resuscitate her like that, it's not only a really cool moment that sets up a very exciting future for him, but with all the uncertainty about his character, I do feel like they earned that moment. Reed's biggest fear in this movie is that Franklin would turn out like him, constantly running all these tests in hopes that he's normal and that their DNA hasn't affected him. And I do think it's really interesting how they explore those fears of passing on your worst traits. But what I think is even more interesting is the big message of it all being that our kids will grow beyond us and can become more than we ever were. And I love that it's Reed and Sue coming together to create Franklin and making something that is greater than the sum of its parts and someone who will go on to do amazing things one day, all because they took that risk. It's such a great takeaway and a satisfying conclusion that helps ease their stress about this oncoming baby, knowing that he will grow beyond them and be better than they ever could be. I think it's a really sweet message that is paid off very well by having Franklin resuscitate Sue and bring this family back together. And on the topic of Reed and Sue, I think their relationship is handled in the best possible way it could be here. They feel like such an authentic married couple in the way they're madly in love with each other, which I can't exactly blame them considering it's Pedro Pascal and Vanessa Kirby, but they also fight and argue and feel. It's not just one constant high as they ride through the lows together and complete each other in a way. With a character like Reed Richards, who is so often mischaracterized as this stone-cold, emotionless monster for some reason, I am so glad that this movie makes it known from the start that Reed is as loving as a husband as he could possibly be. He always has the right intentions and the greater good in mind, but doesn't always go about doing that the right way because he processes things entirely analytically and has such a hard time reading people's emotions. And that takes a very heavy toll on him, but more importantly, on Sue. He has this uncontrollable, self-destructive brain, and Sue directly calls him out on it. Sue is there to ground Reed in reality and try to make sure that he doesn't get caught up in his own head. Because for as much as she fell in love with that big brain of his, it's also the thing that hurts her the most, and I really like that they aren't afraid to show the messier side of that relationship. Seeing that even perfect couples like them go through these rough patches as Sue basically challenges Reed to do better. And it's not done in a malicious way or anything, as it's two characters who just want the best for each other. They really do just balance each other out, as if Reed and Sue are one complete perfect person together as they cancel out each other's flaws when they're with each other. And I think that their relationship and the way they both handle the stress of Franklin being sought out by Galactus is a really interesting lens to view this movie from. And I do want to talk more about Reed's big brain and his characterization as a whole here because I cannot get enough of how perfect this adaptation is. He is such a tricky character to get right in an adaptation because you need to strike the perfect balance between all of his traits and not let one overpower the other. And thankfully the movie and Pedro both come together to create the most ideal Reed Richards characterization I could ever hope for. Seeing him driven by such an immense sense of guilt is exactly how Reed Richards should be presented. That fatal cosmic storm accident that he caused and forever changed the lives of his closest friends and family forever haunts him and stays on his mind all the time. You can really tell that every single decision this Reed makes is entirely because of his anxiety. And Franklin's birth completely shakes up everything he knows in life. From the very first moment he finds out he's going to be a father, he is amazed that the miracle of life even worked at all in the first place after they tried for years. And I love that Reed almost doesn't allow himself to enjoy it, as his brain immediately starts to go to the worst possible scenario. The one line I can't stop thinking about from the movie is when Reed says, "I don't dream, I don't wonder, I invite the worst possible things into my head to figure out how to hurt them before they hurt anyone else," and I don't think I've ever heard Reed Richards describe better than that. This is a man who is constantly tortured by his own intellect, but still, in spite of it all, he perseveres and makes sure to let the people around him know that he loves them and cares for them. While he may be driven by his guilt and anxiety, it doesn't define him, as he is a multifaceted character and feels fully fleshed out, and for the rest of the movie we see him trying to figure out and solve being a father before Franklin's even born. It's exactly the kind of thing Reed Richards would do, and I think seeing him go the extra mile to not only baby-proof the house as we see them putting in smoke detectors and covering up all the light sockets, but his perfectionism making so he's trying to baby-proof the world, it goes a long way to show his obsessive and compulsive nature of things, as he's trying to figure all these problems out before they even arise in the first place, despite the fact that you can never plan or predict a child. But by far the saddest thing about the entire situation is the fact that Reed has this insistence on Franklin being normal. He is running every single test, he's doing everything in his power to make sure that Franklin has a perfect birth and he has a normal upbringing and he won't be like him. And I think it is such a tragic part of Reed that he only ever sees the flaws in things, especially when it comes to himself. His guilt weighs down on him, and it never lets him truly be happy, as he can't even see the wonderful things about himself and his family because he just can't stop thinking about the fact that it was all a mistake that he caused. All of them now being put in harm's way on a daily basis just because he messed up the calculations, and that's already hard enough for them to process as fully grown-up adults. He wouldn't wish that at all on his own kid, literally telling Franklin at one point that he feels like there's something wrong with himself, and it's really powerful to see that kind of fear on display in this film. I love the way that Reed's arc is handled in this movie, as he has to learn to sit back and just let Franklin be Franklin. He can't try and force him to be normal and has to learn to accept Franklin, and by proxy accept himself in a way, and know that he's going to make mistakes and things aren't going to be perfect. And for a perfectionist like Reed Richards, that is an incredibly powerful realization to come to, and shows that he is capable of growth. And going back to that idea that our kids are going to grow up and be better than us, I also love the idea that comes with that, being that our kids help make us better. With Franklin's birth going so poorly, Reed is put in a situation he couldn't prepare for ahead of time, and it forces him to confront those ideas head on, and he comes out of it realizing that he's capable of tackling these situations, and even if he doesn't plan something out to a T, he's smart and creative enough to adapt on the fly. I really love that arc for Reed in this movie because I think it brings all of his best and worst traits together. It is peak Reed Richards characterization and made me so happy to see in that theater. I especially love when Reed Richards is characterized as someone who can't figure out basic social interactions. It's something he'll never be able to fully understand. A math problem is always going to have the same answer, but human beings are unpredictable and something that he can't solve. So it feels very natural when he says these wrong things around Sue, because out of context he doesn't understand what this is going to sound like to someone else who doesn't have his brain. He's not able to think things through like that, and you see this confusion on his face because he doesn't understand what he's done wrong. It all comes together to create an authentically autistic portrayal of Reed Richards. From the way he has to explain his thoughts and feelings to every little mannerism he makes, he is explicitly an autistic coded character in this movie. The only thing that's missing is them outright saying it. During that argument he has with Sue, when he gets to explain his train of thought and the way he interacts with the world and his family, it really just screams an autistic characterization for Reed. And the movie is so much better off for it, but I do really like the idea that he uses science to connect with people. Like how we see him with his own TV show called Fantastic Science, where he's basically this universe's version of Bill Nye. Not only do I think it's a very cute idea, but it really shows Reed's passion for science and wanting to make the world a better place and getting kids invested in it. I will say that he probably could have used a little bit more creative stretching, but I do appreciate that he was at least constantly stretching in general. The effect on his powers looked as good as they possibly could, which was really nice to see, because stretching is something that can so easily slip into that uncanny valley. So I'm glad that they were able to take the time and make sure that Reed's stretching never looked fake. And you know what? That might be because Pedro Pascal can actually stretch. That's why they didn't need CGI. He can just do that in real life. I just have to hope that they wanted to keep his stretching basic at the start so that there's room for growth, because I need to see him doing the most insane things with it. I'm talking Reed turning himself into a ball, peeking his head around corners, using eye binoculars, and of course, turning himself into a giant teacup. Just please let this man stretch in the silliest possible way in future appearances. But here's the thing, we gotta talk about my favorite member of the Fantastic Four, if you couldn't tell already, Ben Grimm, aka The Thing. I have a lot to say about how Ben is handled in this movie, both good and bad, but let's start off with the positives. I do genuinely like that because we're skipping 4 years into the Fantastic Four's tenure as a superhero team, Ben has actually found some kind of happiness. I think it's a very interesting way to differentiate him from past versions of The Thing, and provides a fresh canvas of characterization that we've never seen before in live action. More than any other member of the team, we do get to see more of Ben's personal life, as we get to see his love of cooking and how happy he is to be himself around his friends and family. He's grown to a place where he has come to terms with his physical appearance and has learned to make the most of it. He's also very much so allowed to be the everyman of the team, as we see him interacting with the public more than anyone else. Clearly this beloved celebrity and someone who is looked up to as a role model in the community. It is such a sweet moment to see all the kids cheering Ben on and rooting for him as he picks up the car. It's genuinely heartwarming to see a character who is known for their suffering thriving this much on the big screen. It's like the ever-loving blue-eyed thing has come to life in all of the best possible ways. I do think that was also done for a reason, because when the Fantastic Four inevitably get introduced into the main MCU timeline, it's going to be such a culture shock for Ben to go from a society that wholeheartedly accepts him to the miserable MCU New York that will probably hate him, and he has to learn to love himself all over again. It's gonna hurt him a lot more already knowing what that love feels like and having it ripped away during the universe merge. So I do think that they're playing the long run here, but despite the fact that he's in a better place emotionally, he still has this lingering sense of wanting to fit in, and I think that is where this movie falters the most for me. I mentioned earlier that my biggest problem with the film is that I think it's too short and needed some more time to let these characters breathe, and I think no character is a bigger victim of the runtime than The Thing. While they absolutely nail everything about his characterization and design, it's his character arc that I think the movie needed to devote more time to develop. There are noticeably absent scenes in the trailer, like a conversation between Sue and Ben that was cut, that I was really looking forward to seeing, because those are the two members of the Fantastic Four we rarely see interact, and I think they could have had such a special bond as Sue helps Ben see the best of himself. And that could have bled over in a really interesting way into the side plot he has with Natasha Lyonne's character, who is surprisingly not Alicia Masters, and is actually an original character who goes by the name of Rachel Rosman. As much as I think that Natasha would have made an incredible Alicia Masters, I do think that making her an homage to Jack Kirby's wife is such a sweet tribute, as her name is Rosalind and she went by Roz. It's just another way this movie becomes such a touching love letter to Jack Kirby, and I really appreciate that attention to detail. I just wish we could have seen their story develop and have a proper conclusion together. Ben and Rachel share 3 scenes together. The first time they meet outside of the school, a second time when Ben is too scared to go and talk to her, and then a third time when Ben visits the synagogue and sees her again. And not to go on another one of my famous tangents, I can't tell you how happy it made me to see this movie openly embrace the fact that The Thing is a Jewish character. Every single live-action adaptation has completely abandoned that, despite him being Marvel's premier Jewish superhero. And for a character who is heavily based on Jack Kirby himself, it just feels right that they're going to show that on screen, and it makes complete sense in the story too, as it happens during the film's all is lost moment when the Fantastic Four don't know how much time they have left. I think it's so sweet to see Ben visit a synagogue at the end times when he makes the conscious decision to go talk to Rachel again now that the fate of the world is at stake. It feels like the movie is missing one more scene where Ben, inspired by Sue's words, goes to meet up with Rachel and allows himself to actually be happy. He would have gotten a very satisfying character arc that way, and I do think it's a shame that the movie just doesn't have enough time to give Ben something to do. It's very impressive though that despite some of Ben's scenes clearly being cut out of the film, he's still given such a perfect characterization that left me wanting to see so much more of him. Although I do like the smaller character arc Ben gets as he finally embraces his status as a public figure. It's very clear that Ben has a hard time accepting his position as a superhero in this universe, and the way the movie demonstrates that is with his famous "clobberin' time" catchphrase. In this iteration of the Fantastic Four, his iconic catchphrase was something that was created by the cartoon and not something that Ben ever said. So everywhere he goes, everybody is always asking him to say the line, and it's clearly something he doesn't want to do because he doesn't think it's authentic to himself, and serves as a constant reminder of what he's become. It also doesn't help that Johnny is constantly making fun of him over it, trying to rage bait him into saying what time it is. But because of the fact that this movie gives his catchphrase more meaning, when he finally yells out, "It's clobbering time," and hits Galactus with a giant cannonball, it is the best possible payoff and had me wanting to jump out of my seat and start pumping my fist in the air. I was filled with so much adrenaline I could have ran through a wall. It goes crazy hard. And when it comes to giving meaning behind "It's clobbering time," it's so much better than making it something his abusive brother said before he beat him. I still can't believe they did that, but I'm gonna stop talking about it before I go on another tangent. Someone who does get a lot to do, though, is Johnny Storm's Human Torch, who has such a big role in this movie that it honestly surprised me in the best possible way. Besides the fact that he didn't say flame on, which I can't believe we didn't hear, but they make up for it by giving us the most perfect adaptation of Johnny I could ever ask for. He's brave, hot-headed, caring, annoying, adventuring, horny, curious, and he's so caring and supportive with every member of his family, especially someone like Herbie, which really warms my heart. I love that Johnny exclusively calls him Herbert and gives him little head scratches every time he helps him out. It's the most wholesome dynamic ever, and I have the biggest smile on my face right now just thinking about it. It is the definitive take on Johnny. There is truly nothing you could do to improve him. Joseph Quinn deserves a round of applause from everyone. I want every single person who ever doubted him to write him a thoughtful handwritten letter apologizing, because he knocked it out of the park. I love how much more introspective this version of Johnny is. While everyone else might have already found their calling, Johnny almost feels lost in life to an extent. He yearns for the stars and to explore space, but due to the fact that Reed still doesn't trust himself to build proper spacesuits, he's unable to go and explore his passion among the cosmos. And I think it is such a smart decision to characterize Johnny as someone who is obsessed with space. More often than not, Johnny is just boiled down to being Sue's stupid, immature brother, but I adore the fact that this movie shows how genuinely smart Johnny can be. You fully understand why Reed wanted him on that expedition into the cosmos, because this is someone who has spent their entire life idolizing and studying space. He might not have any PhDs like Reed and Sue or be a trained pilot, but he has such a genuine sense of adventure that really comes in hand during this movie. I think this is best exemplified when Johnny and Reed get into a little bit of a disagreement in the laboratory, as Reed kind of underestimates Johnny, and because of that, it puts this chip on his shoulder where he wants to prove himself and show that he's much more capable than any member of the team gives him credit for. Literally at every turn, he's trying to get their attention and prove that he knows what he's talking about. I love that Johnny is able to get an opportunity to prove all of them wrong, as he deciphers his alien language, showing that when he locks in and puts his mind to something, he's a very quick learner and able to see things in a way that nobody else on the team could, showing just how valuable his perspective is as a member of the Fantastic Four. Seeing him pick up on all the mysterious messages Reed has been receiving, and match that with the short phrase the Silver Surfer told him, it gives Johnny this puzzle to solve, and over the course of the movie, we see him putting the pieces together as he goes out of his way to obtain the information he needs to build a key. What the rest of the family perceive as Johnny goofing off and thirsting over the Silver Surfer, which is definitely half true, knowing him, is actually Johnny on a mission, and basically tricking the Silver Surfer into giving him exactly what he needs to solve this problem. I love that he has the biggest brain move in the entire movie, and it's really cool to see him go from this underdog to the guy who basically saves the day at the end, because without him, the Silver Surfer would have never been converted. And I do love that he's still very much so an act first, ask questions later kind of guy with this boyish recklessness charging headfirst into every situation, but it doesn't come from a place of stupidity or ego, as it's genuinely just Johnny trying to do the best that he can. He just happens to not think it through ahead of time, because he is so eager to get into the fight and help people and explore space and just kind of live his life to the fullest. The movie especially does a really great job highlighting Johnny's bravery, as he's the first person to confront the Silver Surfer. He makes the first move on Galactus. He puts himself in harm's way because he knows he can take it and is willing to take those risks ahead of his family. Behind his team's back, he goes to try and make a deal with the Silver Surfer to take him instead of Franklin, which is an incredibly noble act that is unfortunately doomed to fail, but it's the thought that counts and goes a long way in showing Johnny's maturity. And even then, in the final act, Johnny was fully prepared to dive into Galactus and knock him into the portal, sacrificing himself just to make sure that this cosmic threat doesn't hurt the people he cares about. And while he might be thwarted by the Silver Surfer, I still think it goes a long way in solidifying Johnny as the supportive brother that this family needs. And I'm willing to die on this hill, but this is by far the best Johnny and Ben dynamic we will ever see. Over the course of the entire movie, we are constantly seeing them trying to get under each other's skin. Johnny is especially rage baiting on levels that have never been rage baited before, as he takes every opportunity he can to try and piss Ben off. Whether it be the way he shoves his action figure in Ben's face, or constantly egging him on to say the catchphrase. It's so funny because he's such a jerk about it, but he's doing it in the most endearing way possible. The back and forth they have before Sue jump scares them is actually hilarious. They have such great banter between each other, and really just feels like two brothers trying to annoy the other. And then other times we get to see them doing bits together just to get under Reed's skin as they're pretending to fall asleep when he's explaining things. It's not just a mutually exclusive, one-way abusive relationship. At the end of the day, you can tell that they really care for each other. killer. Johnny goes out of his way to compliment Ben on the beard and tell him to keep it, and then when he finally grows it all out, he's the first person to mention how good it looks on him. They might have this little rivalry together, but it doesn't change the fact that they still love and care about each other, and this movie makes sure you see that. And while we're at it, let's talk more about the Silver Surfer and her relationship with Johnny Storm in this film. I think that using Shala Bal instead of Norrin Radd is a great way to utilize this film being in another multiverse, while also separating this movie from the rise of the Silver Surfer. And because of that, we also get to see a really interesting dynamic blossom between Shala Bal and Johnny Storm. Not only does Johnny become infatuated with her the moment he lays his eyes on his own face reflected on her silver skin, but it starts this obsession he has with figuring out what's going on with her. He could sense that they had a moment in space together and that she isn't some heartless killer, and I think that goes a long way to show Johnny's compassion. And I do love that while Johnny does have the hots for her, he also falls for her with this awe and wonder of the cosmos, which I think is really sweet. And then when he finally does crack the code, we get to see how smart he is, as he's able to lure her into Times Square and trap her in this loop of recordings with all the planets that she helped destroy. It's a really powerful moment as she's forced to confront the things she's been running away from. As Johnny basically guilt trips her, he makes her see the ugly truth of everything she's been doing, and I think it's a really great way to highlight what makes Johnny so special, all while differentiating this version of the Silver Surfer from any other one we've seen before. I hesitate to even compare her to previous versions of the character because she feels so unique, and it's honestly an unfair comparison because she is just so effortlessly the coolest character to ever grace the MCU, aura farming harder than anyone has ever aura farmed in the history of aura farming. She does some of the craziest things I've ever seen in a superhero movie. I know I keep bringing it up every 5 seconds, but that space sequence is genuinely mind-blowing. I never thought we would see something that beautifully cosmic in the MCU, and it makes the Silver Surfer feel like such an intimidating threat, almost positioning her as the villain of the film, as she's this unstoppable machine doing whatever it takes to accomplish her task. But she also makes sure to do it in style as they finally make use of the name Silver Surfer. We get to see her use that board in such creative ways as she literally surfs on a black hole. Is that not just... I'm speechless. It's so cool. I am dying to rewatch that sequence over and over again because they went out of their way to think of the most inventive and exciting ways they can use this character. And I have to give Julia Garner and the CGI team so much credit because they're able to portray so much emotion through that silver CGI, which looks flawless the entire movie, by the way. There isn't a single moment where she looks fake. It just seems like the Silver Surfer was real, even down to the tiniest little detail of the reflections on her body, which I can't even imagine how much of a pain that must have been to render. So seeing her react like that is a really great reminder that there is a real caring soul stuck in this position that does not want to do this, but has made that sacrifice to keep the ones that she loves alive. And her chilling metallic voice is so good. I love the effect they did on it to truly make her feel like a cosmic entity. It definitely helps when you're delivering the hardest lines of all time. And I also found out that Julia learned a whole fake language for this role, which is so impressive. I really like that this movie puts a focus on Zen La as we get to see her speaking that language. Not only is it just a really fun puzzle for Johnny to solve, but it's another layer he can use to connect with her and show just how capable humanity is, which is the kind of detailed storytelling I love to see. But you can't talk about the Silver Surfer without talking about Galactus. I have saved the best for last because I cannot wait to talk about this character. It was absolutely worth the almost 20-year wait to see him finally done justice in live action. One of the first things my friend said to me after the movie ended was that he'd never seen my jaw drop quite like that. I was simply amazed by how incredible he looked in this film. He is so comic accurate that it feels like they took Fantastic Four number 50, shook it, and this big-ass purple guy fell straight out of it. I cannot believe we live in a timeline where Galactus has been featured in an MCU movie, but has also been adapted flawlessly, even down to the fact that he flies around in his ship and uses it to convert things to energy. I remember seeing reruns of the cartoon growing up where they showed that exact thing, and it's just surreal to think that we've seen that now. And they didn't treat it as a joke or anything. Galactus is presented as the ultimate threat the entire time, and it works so beautifully. They don't take a second to make fun of his goofy helmet or anything like that. He is treated like the unstoppable force of nature that he should be, and that was the coolest thing I ever could have seen. I would even go as far as to argue that his design is improved on from the comics. They update him for live action so he looks less like a big guy in a suit and feels like an actual world killer. He is a great example of how you add detail in adaptation. So much effort goes into making him look like this ancient walking weapon. As he's textured like a living Death Star, he feels like a being of pure energy that is just wreaking havoc on the universe because that is his sole purpose. Every single time we see him, from the tattoo to walking around New York City, he feels so threatening and like a natural disaster personified. I loved his design so much so that I bought the $80 Galactus popcorn bucket. I bought him and the HERBIE because I am very irresponsible with my money. You can't blame me, okay? I was only gonna buy the HERBIE, and the guy at the counter told me that they only have 2 Galactus left in stock before they're out forever, so I had to take the opportunity while it was there. And you know what? I stand by it. This thing is so fucking cool, okay? I haven't figured out where I'm gonna display it, but that's a problem to solve for another time. I gotta make a review now. But what's so cool is that they're able to take Galactus and flesh him out even more by having him want Franklin. Galactus and Franklin have such an unexpected and fascinating history in the comics together, as Franklin has gone on to become Galactus. I'm sure you've probably heard that trivia everywhere by now. I really like the idea of tying Galactus and Franklin together from the start because it gives them a really interesting foundation to build off of for the future, and is a great way to show just how powerful Franklin really is, that Galactus wants him because Franklin is the only thing that will finally satiate his endless hunger and free him from this torturous curse as a walking planet killer. Franklin is Galactus' way out, and I really like that this version has wants and needs and is more personified than Galactus usually is. He might be as essential to the universe as the stars themselves, but if he's able to free himself from this pained existence of exponential starvation, he is more than willing to take that opportunity and pass the curse onto someone else. It's a really interesting take on Galactus, but I especially love how careless he is. The way he looks at the Earth as bugs, the way we would an anthill, knowing that both physically and sophistically? That's not a word. Knowing that both physically and on a sophisticated level, he is superior to us in every single way, and that he is showing humanity mercy just by giving them a decision to make in the first place. Almost like this unstoppable, careless cosmic horror as he steps through the streets of the city, blissfully stomping on everything he can just because it gives him some semblance of joy. I think my favorite Galactus moment in the entire film, though, is when he grabs Reed and starts stretching him, putting him through the worst kind of torture, and you just see this little smirk on Galactus's face, as if he's finally found something in the universe that amuses him, literally playing with his food. It is so callous, and I love seeing a version of Galactus with this much personality. Ralph Ineson does such a good job in his performance, walking a very fine line between an ancient cosmic entity of the universe and a guy who really wants his existence to end, especially considering that he's personified enough to the point where his greed is his fatal flaw. He could have easily just destroyed the Earth and moved on with his day, but he wouldn't stop until he had Franklin. Once he got the idea of being free in his head, he wouldn't let go. As the Fantastic Four almost called his bluff, as he didn't destroy the Earth because he was much more preoccupied with getting Franklin and being free. And I really love that they exploit that in the film and use it to their advantage to trap Galactus in their teleporter and blast him across the universe. But what really makes that final third act fight hit for me is how much their plans kept falling apart. They failed 4 different times to stop him, which is incredibly on brand. It's such a great way to position Galactus as this unstoppable force and immovable object, as they're literally trying to square up with him, but he just keeps walking as if the Fantastic Four are nothing more than dust particles barely having an effect on him. At every single turn, their plan constantly backfires because Galactus is not meant to be beaten, and every single time they hit a roadblock, they find a new idea, because that is what the Fantastic Four are all about. They get the bright idea to go track Galactus in space and bargain with him, and when that backfires horribly when he wants Franklin instead, they come back to Earth and get the new idea to teleport the Earth away from Galactus where he'll never find them. And when that doesn't work because the Silver Surfer destroys all of their teleporters, they get the new idea to use Franklin as bait to lure Galactus into a trap and teleport him across the universe. And when Galactus sees through their bait and switch, they're forced to think on the fly, and that's why Sue has to give her life. Because the only way to stop someone like Galactus is to make the ultimate sacrifice. We get to see them solving these problems in real time as their time runs out more and more with each new failure. And also, not to read way too much into this, even though that's pretty much what I've been doing the entire video, but that's not important right now. I love the meta storytelling they did with Galactus, where all of the marketing made it so you think that the Fantastic Four are losing, so that when the Fantastic Four do fail to stop him, the stakes feel much higher because the expectations, the trailers, and the Thunderbolts post-credit scene set that their Earth was going to be destroyed, so it's like you're right there with the Fantastic Four feeling that same sense of hopelessness, and then they subvert expectations when they do finally beat him and they manage to save their Earth. I think that's a really clever way to utilize marketing, and I'm very glad that they didn't lose in this movie because it would have been such a bleak ending, and that is not what the Fantastic Four are about in the slightest. slightest. And with the way they defeated him by just teleporting him across the universe, it still leaves the door open for him to come back in the future, which I think is great. I would love to see Galactus pop up in a post-Secret Wars MCU and see how all these other different characters would react to him. I definitely think there's a future for Galactus in the MCU, and I would love to see the creative ways they're able to keep using him. Alright, now that I have talked your ear off about literally every other spoiler and character in this movie, it's time to talk about the post-credit scenes and the future. Funnily enough, we actually know what's up next for once, as they've made it very clear that the Fantastic Four will have a big role in Avengers Doomsday, which means I don't have to go into rampant speculation, and I very much so appreciate that because my brain is fried and I can only think about the Fantastic Four right now. So let's take a hard pivot into talking about the mid-credit scene, where we get our first look at Doctor Doom. Well, kind of at least. We see him from behind. We get some Doctor Doom back shots. I'm keeping that in the video. As he's showing his face to Franklin with his mask in hand. After he was teased earlier on in the film when Latveria was missing from the Future Foundation conference, which I did pop off for in the theater, that did get my attention. First of all, before I dive into my complicated feelings about Robert Downey Jr.'s Doctor Doom, I think it's really interesting that this post-credit scene takes place 4 years after Franklin was born, meaning that the Fantastic Four have been a superhero team for 8 years up to this point, and we've only seen them for like a single year of that. It's crazy to think about, and I would pay Marvel obscene amounts of money to see all of those 8 years of their history. I don't know how long it will be until we get our next Fantastic Four movie, and it will probably take place in the modern day, so I am praying that Marvel gives us an animated series in that 60s art style. I would eat that up. But we see Sue reading to a now 4-year-old Franklin before she goes to get another book, and then when she comes back, Doctor Doom is there and he's talking to Franklin. This is a very open-ended post-credit scene that makes one thing clear. Doomsday has arrived. And I can't decide how I feel about this scene, because even ignoring the fact that I don't love Robert Doomey Jr., I also don't love the fact that Doom is showing his face in his very first appearance, when that mask being seared to his face is such an important part of his identity. I don't know how to feel about that because I don't think we should be seeing Doctor Doom's face at all, let alone the implication of it in his first scene in Doomsday. And maybe if they're doing the version of Doctor Doom that I prefer, where he's not horribly scarred and the mask isn't seared to his face, as it's just something he uses to cover up one tiny little scar because his ego is so fragile and one tiny blemish makes him believe that he is horribly disfigured. I think that's the more interesting interpretation of Doctor Doom's face. But if that's the case, he still shouldn't be taking his mask off. Maybe they're gonna do something where Doom uses Franklin to heal his scarred face and make him look like Tony Stark for some reason. That's the only reason I could think of why we'd see Doom like this right off the bat. And I might be huffing some copium right now, but I do think that could be a way to make it so he's not the true Doom appearance, and that way it leaves the door open for Doom's face to be revealed at the end of Doomsday or Secret Wars, and we get a Romani Doctor Doom actor. Downey is one of the best actors in the 21st century, so there's no doubt that he's going to give a good performance, but also he's not right for Doctor Doom, and I can't look past that. I hope that despite how cynical I am, it's for the best, and will try to do everything I can to keep an open mind. Fantastic Four, Thunderbolts, and even Brave New World have gone a long way to actually make me very excited for that movie, because I can't wait to see those characters' stories continue and the way they all interact with each other. It's just that this adaptation of Doctor Doom, where a big part of his story is going to revolve around Tony Stark, is at the center of it all, so I don't know. Every single new Marvel movie gets me more excited for the film. I hope they're able to turn me around on it, but they gotta do a lot to win me over. At the very least now, I do see the angle they could be taking with him and Franklin, so I hope there's something to that. We'll have to wait and see in a year and a half from now. That brings us to the second post-credit scene, that being the intro for the in-universe 60s Fantastic Four cartoon, which I don't have much to say about besides that I think it's cute. They clearly put a lot of time and effort into recreating that art style, and the mastermind that is Michael Giacchino made a whole theme for it, so I do appreciate seeing that at the very end of the movie. But honestly, what I loved more than that scene is the way the actual credits end, with this quote from Jack Kirby himself saying, "If you look at my characters, you will find me. No matter what kind of character you create or assume, a little of yourself must remain there." I think that is such a beautiful way to end this movie that is clearly a tribute to Jack Kirby and this fantastic family he created. It's no secret that he put a lot of himself into these characters, especially someone like The Thing, and I think ending the movie with that quote is such a nice personal touch that acts as this beautiful bow on this movie, tying it all together with so much love and passion from the creators and everyone who had the absolute pleasure of bringing the Fantastic Four to life like this. Jack Kirby tragically never got the appreciation he deserved when he was alive, and the best we can do to make up for that is to make sure that his legacy is known and will outlive us all as one of the most important comic creators of all time. So to see his name and his quote blown up on a big screen like that, and the confirmation that Earth 828 is named in honor of his birthday, I think is the sweetest thing ever and a great way to make sure that Kirby's legacy stands the test of time. Alright, I know it's been an hour and 12 minutes, but I'm finally going to give my star rating for this film. I would give Fantastic Four First Steps 4.5 stars. It is an incredibly inventive and inspired comic book movie that finally did the Fantastic Four right. I just think that had the movie had a little bit more time, it could have been perfect. All that being said, over probably the last hour, I love this movie so much. I've been working on just recording this review over the course of an entire day because I've never had a harder time putting into words how much a movie means to me than this, as someone who grew up idolizing the Fantastic Four. Through all of their very few highs and very low lows, I have been with the Fantastic Four for the majority of my life. I still have my Fantastic Car toy from the 2007 Rise of the Silver Surfer film, so it's safe to say that these characters mean a lot to me, and I have been dying for an adaptation that does them right and can show other people why I care about them so much. And it has been a very long journey to get to today, through over 30 years of Fantastic Four adaptations, a Fox buyout for Marvel to secure the rights to this team, a worldwide pandemic, a historic writer and actor strike, and now here we are, years after the film was first announced with an entirely different creative team, we have finally made it to the day where I can say that a new Fantastic Four movie is in theaters, and it is damn good. Every single character in the movie is treated with so much love and care, and is adapted in the best possible way I ever could have expected. It's a movie that gives me all that I ever could have wanted and more, and while I did still leave wanting more, that doesn't take away from the fact that this is a masterfully crafted film that transcends that of the superhero genre to become a sci-fi spectacle, and one that I think is worth watching for anyone, whether you're a lifelong Fantastic Four fan like me, or someone who's looking to see what these characters are all about. It's a movie that anyone can jump into and have an enjoyable experience with. We have been blessed with people who truly care about the Fantastic Four and want to do them right in live action, from director Matt Shakman, someone who grew up reading these characters and understands them probably better than anyone else on the planet, or an incredibly talented cast that embody these characters and take them from the page to bring them into real life. That all comes together in such an ambitious film, both visually, tonally, and structurally, as we step away from the tropes of the superhero genre to let the Fantastic Four thrive in a setting that benefits them most in this sprawling sci-fi saga of Galactus. And I hesitate to say this after holding out in the entire video, but that was the most fantastic movie I ever could have asked for, and I am so happy that it exists. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go file for bankruptcy after buying the HERBIE and Galactus popcorn buckets. Those were not cheap, but you know what? It was worth every cent. I regret nothing. Oh, maybe I can write those off on my taxes now that they've been in a video, after I figure out how taxes work. But while I do that, why don't you let me know what you thought of Fantastic Four First Steps? I would genuinely love to hear what everyone has to say and continue the conversation down below. And while you're at it, make sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. If you don't do it, I'm gonna consume Earth like an apple, so you can either give me that subscription or I'm chomping away.